okay, so yeah, you can record. Fantastic. All right, so going over the top 10 list for Jefferson as a time of revolutions and significant change. They like to ask questions about the Jeffersonian period being a time of change. Jefferson himself called the election of 1800 a revolution. So they like to ask, was it really a revolution? Was the turn of the 18th into the 19th century really a time of revolutionary change? And revolution just means what? Not just change. Not rapid change. Significant change. Significant is different than rapid. Okay? Significant, substantive change. So that's why I gave you the chart that looked at the political, the economic, the religious. Those are, if they ask you a question about, was this a time of significant change, those are the things that you could specifically point to and say, yes, it was a time of significant change. If you look at this, if you look at that, if you look at this. So, the Jeffersonian vision of America, politically, economically, socially, ideologically, what did you have there for that? Yeah, anybody?
There was a second great awakening, leadership by slaves and women. There's also more educational opportunities for women. They were more invited.
Okay, so you've got religious change, which comes in the form of the Second Great Awakening, which is kind of an equal opportunity movement because it encourages women to be involved, it encourages blacks to be involved, it encourages everybody to be involved. That's kind of significant. You talk about, what else? Women going to school. Okay, so you've got increasing educational opportunities, women doing things that they had not previously done before, so it is kind of a substantive revolutionary change for women at this time. Not all women, but it's definitely moving the ball forward. What else did you have for the Jeffersonian vision of America? Yeah.
Jefferson got to instill Republican ideals into the presidency for the first time.
Okay, so what would represent Republican ideals?
He got to, he envisioned the common citizen as a farmer, as like the venerate the plow.
Okay, the whole venerate the plow idea, that the farmer participant in government, that Jefferson saw that as the ideal citizen, the citizen farmer who participated in government and then was also a participant in his own community. That was kind of his vision and his ideal. So how did he implement that?
I didn't see that book.
Okay.
He emphasized for that.
He emphasized, okay, so he instilled it and emphasized it are two different things. I can emphasize things all I like, but unless I actually do the implementation, then I can sit there and emphasize till I'm blue in the face. That's just me talking.
He did a lot of that.
What do you mean he did a lot of what?
He advocated for a lot of change, but
yes,
not as much change as he wanted to happen.
That's right. Now, this seems like a familiar chestnut. A president comes into office and promises change, but you don't wind up getting as much change as you thought or hoped for. That is an old chestnut that goes all throughout American history. So modern history is not, something new. Yes?
I saw in the very beginning of the chapter, it said something about rational philosophy.
An emphasis on rational philosophy. Do you know what rationalism is? It's thinking based on evidence. It's based on evidence and science and rational thought. There's a logic to the way we think. We work through a problem by identifying the problem, thinking about what the possible solutions are, examining the efficacy of those solutions, coming up with a proposal, and implementing it. That is rational thought. It's a logical progression of solving issues. Jefferson was a rationalist. He believed in science. He believed in education. He believed that the citizen was best, that was most informed. He's an Enlightenment guy. He's Benjamin Franklin, just younger, and not as not as willing to go out with French prostitutes. But that was Ben Franklin, man. He loved the ladies. All right. So you have that Jeffersonian vision of America, of a limited government, of the citizen farmer, of rationalism, of education, emphasis on science, emphasis on evidence. But you don't necessarily get that throughout the age of Jefferson. Educational opportunities in America. What did people put? I'll just call them. Yeah, Jacob. Okay, so the idea of the tax-supported public school, which you are a beneficiary of, okay? The people of Anne Arundel County pay taxes to allow this school to function and to pay me and to give you the textbooks and all the doodads that you guys have. Well, that idea really takes off in the early 1800s, and it takes off primarily in New England and northern states and in the Midwest, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, okay? There is an emphasis on educating the masses. Why, though? For the sake of it? What does an educated populace do? Yeah. Exactly. You have wise and informed voters who can participate and make rational decisions in the Jeffersonian Republic. Yes. Good job. What else do you have for educational opportunities? Yeah. Yeah, there was an emphasis on Native Americans attending schools. Now, these would be Native American schools for Native Americans, but the idea was to denativize them. And the fancy word that I had in the notes was assimilate. I know, it's very Star Trek Borgy, assimilation. Resistance is futile. You will become one of us. Yeah.
Modern degrees besides industry?
There is a modernization of the university system in America with an emphasis on real and practicable learning. You're not learning Latin. Latin's a dead language. You're not learning Greek. Greek culture's 2,000 years old. You're learning modern science, modern writing, law, modern philosophy. There's an emphasis on getting rid of what would be considered the classics and embracing a more modern curriculum. And in particular, medical schools start to come about at this time to train doctors. Now, doctors like Benjamin Rush are still going to prescribe leeches for you because they believed that you could suck the bad blood out of somebody and that would make you well. They also believed that bleeding you, opening up your veins and letting the bad blood come out would cure you. But sometimes that killed the patient. And the person I think about when that happens is George Washington. George Washington was not killed by what he was suffering from. He was killed by the treatment. He was bled to get rid of strep. He was suffering from strep throat. And he was like in his 60s. And the prescription was to bleed him. And he was so old that he couldn't handle it. And he died like the last week of December 1799. Man didn't even live to see the 19th century. So he was purely a man of the 18th century. What else did people want to say? Yeah.
There was an increasing opportunity for women to get educated.
Absolutely. And for education's sake?
To teach their sons to be educated.
And that then bleeds into the idea of Republican motherhood. What is this idea of Republican motherhood? Yeah.
The idea that women should be educated in order to teach their children Republican values.
In the Jeffersonian Republic, it was important that sons be educated to participate in the government, to participate in the country. Yes?
Women's education was for the benefit of the family, not themselves.
That's exactly it. That the woman was educated for the benefit of her family, not for her own edification, not for her own sustenance. Although there were women's colleges starting to be formed that allowed women to learn skills for themselves. Anybody ever hear of Elizabeth Blackwell? Really? Okay, here's your here's your Jeopardy answer for the day. Elizabeth Blackwell is universally recognized as the first female doctor in America. But she was trained at a university in the 1820s or 30s. So at a time when women were expected to be good housewives and mothers, she's out there becoming a medical doctor. So she's a pioneer. She's a trailblazer. That idea of Republican motherhood and what the expectation for women was in the 19th century is important for you to understand because it really defines women's expectations prior to the Civil War. What is it that women, and in particular middle-class women, what is it that women were expected to do and be? And it was they were expected to be good wives and mothers and educators to their children. Now, eventually, the public school system that comes about in the early 1800s is going to supplant the need for the mom teaching at home. And the kids are going to eventually go off to public school, and mom's going to be left at home to do the laundry, to do the cleaning, to do the cooking, and all the other traditional, cult of domesticity type things that you start to see. But in the early 19th century, there was a particular vision for women. And it's best described by this Republican motherhood idea, what eventually becomes known as the cult of domesticity. That the woman was expected to be the head of the household. The man participated in the politics and the economics and the business and the law and all that other stuff. And never the two spheres should meet. Separate spheres. Guys, the reason I'm emphasizing that is because in 2005, Republican motherhood was a DBQ. People looked at that question, and I know my guys looked at that question in 2005, and you don't have to move that. People looked at that question in 2005 and said, what the what? What is Republican motherhood? So that's why I'm emphasizing it. Not a lot of people passed that here. Because they didn't know what Republican motherhood was. All right. Advances in medicine, professionalization of medicine. What do you have? Yeah.
They started to get away from primitive practices such as blood and purges such as Benjamin Rush.
Now, Benjamin Rush is kind of the quintessential 18th century into the 19th century doctor who goes from leeches and bleeding and poultices to actual real medicine. I mean, if you want to follow a medical career that kind of defines the advances in medicine in the 18th into the 19th century, you could do no better than looking at Benjamin Rush's career. And not only that, he was a founding father who signed the Declaration of Independence. But here's a guy who began experimenting with inoculations, especially inoculations for smallpox. And they began in the early 1800s to understand the nature of disease, that medicine was more than just making sure your humors were balanced, that your blood and your biles and your, what are the four humors? Blood, black bile, green bile, and is it yellow bile? Is it 3 vials and blood? But you had to make sure. And doctors in the 18th century, they believed that if your humors were off, that's what made you ill. No, they didn't understand the nature of contagion. But by the early 1800s, they began to understand the nature of contagion and work to alleviate that. Benjamin Rush, one of the last things he does is he performs a mastectomy, a double mastectomy, on John Adams's daughter, because they were now beginning to experiment and understand the nature of cancer, and in particular breast cancer. Yeah.
This is for Amber.
Okay. ASAP. All right, so there is a professionalization in the medical field. People are going to colleges to study medicine. They are coming out with a degree that says, I am a certified doctor because I attended this school, and that was becoming more important than the homespun remedy. That's why midwifery kind of goes out the window, because they're not seen as professional. It's seen as kind of folk medicine, which you still had in rural areas. For instance, if you got sick, let's say you had a bad cough, they may prescribe for you a mustard poultice or a mustard plaster. Anybody ever hear of that? Where they would literally put a plaster on your chest and then rip it off, and that would pull the disease out of you. That's the kind of primitive medicine we're talking about here that we're trying to get away from. This emphasis on science and rationality. Yes. That's exactly it. Doctors replace midwives. Exactly. Now, midwifery has made a comeback as of late. But not to the extent that midwives were popular in the 17th and 18th century. What about literary and cultural changes? The American Cultural Revolution. What do you have? Yeah. Absolutely. The idea of Americans in American settings against the backdrop of an American history distinct from Europe. And that's the key. It's distinct from Europe. It's American. We own it. It's ours. There's pride in that. There's cultural nationalism. There's pride in that. There's a celebratory nature to the literature that you see, whether that's James Fenimore Cooper's Last of the Mohicans, which is set against the backdrop of the French and Indian War, which for Americans in 1800 is history. If you think about it, that's history. It's recent history too. And his character in Last of the Mohicans, Hawkeye. Has anybody ever seen Last of the Mohicans with Daniel Day-Lewis? I mean, I will find you, I swear. Really, nobody? Okay, apparently it was made in 1992, so it may be before your time. But the character of Hawkeye, or Natty Bumppo, as he's known as, his name is Natty Bumppo, but he's known as Hawkeye. It's his nickname. He's half Indian, half English. So he's a uniquely American character in a uniquely American setting, the French and Indian War. It comes out of a school of writers known as the Knickerbocker School of Writers. And the Knickerbockers, anybody know what a Knickerbocker is? Huh? Anybody heard of the New York Knicks? Well, why are they called the New York Knicks? Because they're the New York Knickerbockers. It's a Dutch word for pants. Knickers, yes. Pants. It's a Dutch word. Anyway, the Knickerbocker School of Writing and it's not literally a building that says Knickerbocker School. It's kind of a philosophy of writing, of creating American stories. It's known as the Knickerbocker School of Literature, but it is a celebratory American school of literature that counts among its members James Fenimore Cooper, Nathaniel Hawthorne, who else? Herman Melville, Moby Dick, and Edgar Allan Poe also counts himself among that. And then you also had art as well. Did anybody come across anything about art? Okay, I do want to show you this.
Is this the Hudson River?
The Hudson River School of Art. Yes. That is correct. That is correct. Now, if you take a look at this, and I do want to take some time. I'm not giving you the full McGillet here, but I do want to take some time to show you this. Yes.
Can we move it closer again?
You know what?
Can we move
Yeah,
it
you can move it
again?
closer. No problem. Got it.
Good?
There you go. Awesome. All right. so if you take a look at this painting, this is emblematic of what's known as the Hudson River School of Painters. And again, it's not a building that says Hudson River School on it. It's a philosophy of painting. What is the philosophy that you see here, art students? What? It's very idealized. I would even argue it's very romantic. And not romantic in, I love you, but romantic in emotional connection. What were you going to say?
It's painting South American.
Well, but why put paint to canvas to paint that? Just like a writer writes things for a reason, a painter paints things for a reason, because they're feeling or doing something in their head. Yeah.
It's symbolism for the wild frontier expanding off into the distance.
I definitely see expansion here. What else do you see here? I'm trying to get you to artfully think. Yeah.
Well, I'm just thinking it's like, oh, we're showing the majesty of America.
That's it. It's the idea of the majesty, the glory, what's the word I'm looking for? The exceptionalism of America. That we are a special place. Does anybody see God in this? It's all glowy. That's right. Well, glowy can mean several things. Glowy can mean God or spirituality. It can also mean opportunity. It can mean optimism. But there is a general celebration of the special nature of what God has given Americans. That nobody else on the planet has this kind of beautiful opportunity before them. That look at this, the possibilities are limitless. And you'll see as we go through the 19th century, I'll show you different examples of Hudson River School of Art paintings. They're beautiful, beautiful. But they're very romantic and idealistic in nature. And it's always a test question. Hudson River School of Art is always a test question. Because it checks the box. Hey, look, we covered art and culture. Checks the box. Okay? So I would say you need to know Hudson River School. By the way, have you noticed, where is the Hudson River? In New York. Knickerbocker School of Writers? New York. Why is New York such a center of culture at this time? Manufacturing, rise of city growth, influx of immigrants coming to New York. Why are they coming to New York and not Philadelphia, not Boston, and not Charleston?
Jobs and factories.
Jobs and factories. But why are the jobs and factories growing in New York unlike any other place? Yes. Bing! That's it. The construction of the Erie Canal is the game changer. The canal is so striking, it's eerie. But the Erie Canal is the game changer, and this is why. When you build the Erie Canal, here's New York City, here's the Hudson River, here's the Erie Canal. It links Albany with Buffalo, and it is a man-made ditch dug across the Adirondack Mountains. It creates an all-water route from New York City all the way to Minnesota. Anything you grow, anything you produce can be loaded on a boat and shipped out through New York. That's why New York becomes the biggest city in America. It's the construction of the Erie Canal. And it's really the brainchild of a guy named DeWitt Clinton. And this is a guy that doesn't get any props in American history. To me, he's one of the MVPs of American history. DeWitt Clinton. He was the governor of New York. And he's the guy who came up with this idea. He said, man, if we build a canal, I'll make New York the largest city in the country. And it was a vision. It was a bold vision, and he did it. And I know he had a funny name, DeWitt. Hey, DeWitt, we're going to the store. Ha ha ha. All right. Second Great Awakening, Religious Revolution, and Reform. What did you come up with? Yeah.
That during the Second Great Awakening, there were many messages of temperance, abolition, and an emphasis on
Didn't we have a First Great Awakening? So having a Second Great Awakening presupposes we had a First Great Awakening, right? Okay. So what's the same? So when you have two things, what's the same? What's different? What's the same about the two? Yeah. Wait, go ahead, Pat. Go ahead. That's okay. It's all right. Yeah, what's the same? The idea of self-salvation, okay? In 1730, they're emphasizing self-salvation. Jonathan Edwards and George Whitefield, they're emphasizing self-salvation. In the early 1800s, they're also emphasizing self-salvation. The individual capable of saving themselves. Evangelical preachers traveling around, very similar. Yeah. And the idea of emotion, feeling. I can feel the Holy Spirit. I can feel God in me, and that's what's driving me to do this. What's different with the Second Great Awakening that you didn't see in the first? Yeah. You're seeing an attempt to marry religion and politics in order to affect social change. You're seeing engagement by religious individuals to try to affect political changes, whether that's banning alcohol or abolishing slavery or giving women rights or opening up educational opportunities for people or reforming mental institutions for that matter. You're seeing this marriage between religion and salvation and reform. How can we save ourselves? We do it through self-salvation and by making the world a better place to live. And we do that through political reform. So that's the big game changer with the Second Great Awakening, is this emphasis on political reform, whether it's banning alcohol or getting rid of slavery or rights for women. Yeah, Eric, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say the Second Great Awakening produced abolition.
Yes, it did. It produced abolition. That's where abolitionism comes out of this Second Great Awakening. And I mean, the first abolitionists were your Quakers in Philadelphia, but this idea of freedom is going to spread. Okay? So, again, the individual is capable of self-salvation. You guys all have that in front of you. Now, what they used to do was they used to meet at what were called camp meetings. And literally, you would find out where a particular preacher was going to be. Charles Grandison Finney, Peter Cartwright. You would find out where they were going to be. You'd pack up your tent. You'd pack up your family. And you'd go. And you'd set up camp with everybody else. And it would be like a makeshift community in Christ, where you would sit there and you would share and commiserate and engage in fellowship and listen to the preachers and share ideas. So it's a very religiously empowering idea, but it's also empowering the individual to participate. That makes sense? So this is a big game changer. Second Great Awakening is a big game changer because it engages the population, not just religiously, but politically as well. What can I do to move the ball forward and make the world a better place? And these are called camp meetings. All right. Slavery revolution and the cotton gin. That's pretty cut and dry. You need to know the connection between the cotton gin and slavery. Yeah. Yes, slavery up until 1793 economically was not viable, and most people thought it would die out over time. The cotton gin is the game changer because it makes cotton production important, it makes it easy, and it makes slavery invaluable to the cotton producers. They need the slaves. It leads to an increase in slavery. And it leads to the movement of slaves. Show me a map, any map. It leads to a movement of slaves from where they were in the Chesapeake and the coastal Carolinas into the deep South, where cotton is produced. So you're going to see massive social movement as well for blacks. Because you're moving from tobacco and rice to cotton production. By the way, anybody know who lives down here? In Alabama, in Mississippi, in Louisiana? Well, Navy. You got some French, you got some Spanish. Who are the original inhabitants? Yeah, everybody always seems to forget about these people, but they were there first. And we're talking about the Creek, the Choctaw, the Chickasaw, the Seminole Indians. Why do we know these names? They should be familiar. Creek, Chickasaw, Choctaw, Seminole, Cherokee. Yes. Yeah, they're football team names, yes. Yes, yes. Yeah? Not yet. They will be relocated in 1830 as part of the Indian Removal Act. This is where the Trail of Tears is going to come from. But why are they on the Trail of Tears? It's to clear this land out for cotton production. Your battery is running low. You're at 14%. Fantastic. All right. Industrial Revolution and textile mills. What you got? Yeah.
Expanded the economy and allowed for unskilled women and children to work in mills.
Absolutely. You're going to see a system with textile mills. All right, first of all, let's just run through it real quick. Eli Whitney's cotton gin, game changer, increased cotton production, demand for slaves. Interchangeable parts, also Eli Whitney. So 2 for 2 here. Yeah, plug right there. Is going to allow for the mass production of all manner of industrial created goods. Okay? So now you're seeing an economic game changer where things can be mass produced rather than artisan produced. You no longer need a gunsmith to carve the gun stock and forge the barrel and mold the bullets. You can make all the pieces, have them in a bin, and take part A, put it into part B, and send it down the line, and you don't need to be a genius to do it. So it's going to lead to a need for unskilled labor. That's why textile mills in New England and the Northeast are going to turn to women and children first. They didn't need to have an education in order to work in these mills. And so they're going to be the initial labor source. But then the women are going to get very complaining. They're going to start complaining about their working conditions, sexual harassment on the job, unsanitary conditions, unsafe working conditions, children being killed on the job or at least losing fingers while they're climbing inside the machines there to, get out things. And so when the textile mills realized that the women, these Lowell girls as they're called, after the Lowell system, Francis Cabot Lowell establishes this system where the factory and the workers, the supply stores, and all the things you need are right there. And it looks almost like a campus, doesn't it? But it was everything you needed to manufacture textiles in one location, including the workers. And the girls would live in these dormitories. These Lowell girls, however, got fed up with the way they were being treated and the way they were being paid, and they began to form organizations to demand better working conditions. The first unions in America were founded by women. And you can see here the growing reliance on slavery. Cotton production, need more slaves. Guys, by 1860, we are the Saudi Arabia of cotton. If you want cotton, 3/4 of the world's cotton comes from the United States in 1860.
The oil, Saudi Arabia.
Oh, right. You can replace the cotton. You can't replace the oil. All right. Transportation revolution, canals, turnpikes, steamboats. Big change, big game changer. Why is this a big deal? Yeah.
That allows the traverse of goods and people across the country.
Okay, so you're going to see all manner of inventions from Robert Fulton's Claremont, the first steamboat launched in 1807 that goes up the Hudson River, roads, turnpikes, canals, which are man-made water, man-made rivers, essentially, is to get over mountains. That's the whole point of building a canal. Clipper ships, very fast cargo ship. What don't you see here? Trains. Because the question that we've oftentimes seen is, transportation changes in the age of Jefferson, 1790 to 1830. If you were to talk about railroads, you would technically be wrong. Does anybody know when the first railroad was built in America? That's why they framed the question that way, to try to trip you up. And there is a test question out there that asked about transportation evolution, 1790 to 1830, and invariably everybody puts railroads and they get it wrong. You don't have railroads till 1831. By the way, first railroad in America, where was it built? I wouldn't be making an emphasis on this unless it was important to you. No. To you. Close. Ellicott City. But Maryland. First railroads in America built here in Maryland. Ellicott City. Go up to Ellicott City, see the train museum, where the first railroad was built. Anybody ever played Monopoly? B&O Railroad. Baltimore and Ohio Railroad, the first big railroad that went across the Appalachian Mountains, built here in Maryland. We are the railroad state. All right. So you need to know about roads and canals and turnpike. By the way, what is a turnpike? It's a toll road. It's a road that you pay a toll on, and that's what pays for the construction of the road. You do that today. And you can see here, there is one national road that is built between Baltimore and St. Louis. And the financing for this comes around 1810 to 1811. The Madison administration ponies up the money to build this national road because it is in the nation's interest. But for the most part, if you wanted to build a road or a canal or a turnpike, most politicians said that was up to the states to do. That's why the governor of New York is building the Erie Canal, not the federal government. But the national road was in the nation's interest because what does this road do? But it also promotes westward expansion, because you go right out here to St. Louis. This is the Gateway Arch. It's the gateway to the west. And so it's part of a national endeavor. All right. And then finally, social revolution, growth of cities, influx of immigrants. What do you got? Yeah.
That cities spurred from the manufacturing transportation.
Okay, So wherever the manufacturing and the transportation and the people are coming together, you're seeing the growth of large cities. So throughout, and there's your transportation revolution, just showing you how fast it is to get places. You have that. But the growth of cities in places where there had not previously been cities. Like, for instance, this city here on the Ohio River. This is Cincinnati, circa 1820. In 1808, when Ohio was created, there was nothing there. And yet, here you've got a thriving city growing up because it is a center of trade and manufacturing and commerce. Actually, the nickname for Cincinnati at the time was Porkopolis. It was the #1 meat processing city in America. All right. And then immigrants. You can see here, where are people moving? Why the north? That's where the mills and the factories and the opportunities are. If you move to the south, what are your choices? Farming, subsistence farming, or slavery. That's it. You've got a very monolithic economy, not very diverse here in the south. You've got a very diverse economy in the north. That's why more people are going to move to the north. Guys, right here, just from the influx of German and Irish immigrants into the north, you're seeing the reason why the North wins the Civil War. It's literally numbers. 22 million people in 1860 to 9 million people in 1860. And Ulysses S. Grant, General of the United States Army, could count. We kill more of them than they kill of us. North. All right. Let's pass up that top 10, please, shall we? It was a little bit longer than I wanted to spend on that, but. Good night. Come on, folks. All right. So, we get to the Jefferson presidency itself. And the big question with Jefferson, here's Washington, 1801. The big question with Jefferson is always, Jefferson believed in a limited government. He believed in a weaker federal government, stronger state government. He valued the rights of individuals. So he's a limited government guy. Did he actually govern that way? That's always a question. Does Jefferson govern as a limited government guy? And if he does, great. If he doesn't, why not? So we're going to emphasize this question of Jefferson as a limited government or not guy. That grammatically didn't make sense. But here's Washington, D.C. in 1801. There's not much there. It's brand new. The capital's only 10 years. It actually opened for business in 1800. The cornerstones were laid in 1790. It opened for business in 1800. John Adams is the first occupant of the White House in November 1800, just in time to lose re-election and give the place up to Thomas Jefferson. So Thomas Jefferson is the first president inaugurated in Washington, D.C., inaugurated at the Capitol. He walks to the White House because there's nothing else there. It's the Capitol, the White House, and a couple of buildings. That's it. So Jefferson comes into office believing that his election is a revolution. He says we need to move beyond party IDs, however. And he says in his inaugural address, we are all Federalists, we are all Republicans. But he believes that he has an opportunity to significantly change, revolutionize government in America. But was he really a limited government guy? Was the election of 1800 really a revolution? In some respects, yes. So, if you're answering a question and you say that Thomas Jefferson is a limited government guy, what is it that you could look to? Well, look at what he does. In his first year in office, he gets rid of all internal taxes, including the hated excise tax on whiskey that led to the Whiskey Rebellion. He repeals it, gets rid of it, cuts all internal taxes. Can you imagine if a president came in and cut all your taxes? He cuts all taxes, internal taxes. You are no longer being taxed. That's limited government, baby. That's like a Tea Partier's dream. Jefferson top 10, Eric.
Got it. Okay. What's the name of this YouTube page? Southern HS APUSH. There you go.
Have fun.
Yeah.
All right. He allows the Alien and Sedition Acts to expire. These acts that him and Madison had written the Virginia and Kentucky resolutions in opposition to. They're gone. And the people who were imprisoned under the Alien and Sedition Acts are given free pardons. He cuts military spending drastically. The dreaded Navy and Army that John Adams had created that Jefferson didn't like, he cuts the spending on that. And in the process, cuts the debt in half. Amazing, isn't it? Cuts all internal taxes and is able to cut the debt in half. All by limiting the scope of government. I mean, most Democrats today consider Thomas Jefferson to be the patron saint of their party. But Republicans should take a look at this today. I mean, that's like Republicanism 101 right there. Cut taxes, cut government, cut the budget, and cut the debt. Boom. So yes, Jefferson does limit the size and scope of government. He also emphasizes kind of an informality. He gets rid of a lot of the trappings of the presidency. The horse and carriage, the 6 white horses and the black carriage, gone. The wait staff in the White House, cut. As a matter of fact, most times if you knocked on the door, Jefferson would answer the door himself in his pajamas and slippers. So there was a real informality to the presidency. But this is not all that Jefferson does as president. Jefferson not only maintained a lot of Federalist ideas, he actually expanded the size and scope of government. He said, I'm a strict constructionist regarding the Constitution, yet he expands the role of the Constitution here. He loosely interprets the Constitution on a number of occasions, and it's the things that define him. When you think of Jefferson, the 2 or 3 things that people think about are the Barbary Pirates War, the Louisiana Purchase, and the embargo. All of them represent expanding the size of government. The bank, the financial plan that Jefferson hated, the reason why 2 political parties exist in this country, the debate over the bank, he not only kept the bank, he kept the assumption plan in place. He kept all of Hamilton's financial plan in place except for the excise tax. Federalist office holders, he left them in place, like low-level government officials, left them in place, mainly because they knew where the paper clips and staples were kept. Think about that. If you come into a business as a brand new boss, are you going to fire everybody in that business and replace them with your own people? No, you need the people who know where the bodies are buried. He kept most Federalist judges in place, although he did try to get several Federalist judges impeached, like Samuel Chase. That was an attempt at expanding the size of government there. I mean, who's the executive to demand that this judge get impeached? Just to remove him because he's a Federalist. But the war against the Barbary pirates, Jefferson takes us to war without asking Congress for a declaration of war. He uses the military that John Adams had created to do it. That's an expansion of the size of government. When a president takes us to war without asking Congress's permission, that's an expansion of power. Buying Louisiana without congressional approval, that's an expansion of power. Where did he get the money to do it? He just did it. And then an embargo, which we'll talk about in just a minute. Okay? But those are the things we really need to look at with regard to Jefferson. Now, I will get back to this. I will get back to John Marshall and the Supremes. Okay? I just want to get through Jefferson first, and then we'll go back and talk about the role of John Marshall. Okay, because John Marshall's kind of there as the ghost of Federalists past. Okay, even when the Federalist Party is dead and gone, John Marshall's still there with Federalist ideology. Okay, so we'll talk about that in just a second. All right, so what are the events that define the Jefferson presidency? Comes in, cuts taxes, cuts the budget, cuts the military, pardons people. But the Barbary Pirates War is an expansion of presidential power. The Barbary pirates are from North Africa. They are small little Muslim states. Tunis, Tripoli, Algiers, and all of them are run by what are called pashas, or princes. And these pashas are sending their men out into the Mediterranean to harass European shipping and American shipping. Basically, they're pirates. Stop the ships, steal the cargo. Now, Europe says, look, man, we'll pay them ransom. That's just the price of doing business in Europe. But Jefferson says, I'm not doing this. I'm not allowing people to stop our ships and take our cargo and demand a ransom. No. So Jefferson is going to use the Navy to go after the Barbary pirates, but he does it as the commander-in-chief. He doesn't seek congressional approval. He doesn't ask Congress for a declaration of war against the Barbary pirates. He just says, I'm the commander-in-chief, send the Navy, go get them. And he does it. And for years, America is engaged in a war against Muslims on the other side of the country. Oh my God, what? You can almost hear George W. Bush talking about the terrorists overseas and how they're infringing on American rights. And we're going to go over there and we're going to smoke them in and out of their holes. Jefferson's doing, this is the first war on terrorism. And it's in 1801, 1802. But here is a president using unlimited presidential power to go after an enemy with no end game in sight. And when the American ship Philadelphia is captured by Barbary pirates and held captive in Tripoli, you get this daring raid on the Philadelphia to rescue the crew. Does anybody know the group that was sent? No, it wasn't SEAL Team 6. But does anybody know the group that was sent to rescue the crew of the Philadelphia in Tripoli? Yes? The Marine Corps. There is a reason why in the Marine Corps hymn they sing from the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli, because it is the first time the Marines are used in combat. And they rescue the crew of the ship and scuttle the boat, blow it up. All of this without congressional oversight. Oh, and by the way, Jefferson hammers out an agreement at the end of this, and we wind up paying these guys off anyway. So we wind up paying them off to get out of this war. How did we get out of Iraq? I forget. How did we get out of Iraq? Oh, that's right. We paid off the people to stop bombing us. This is very much familiar. Very familiar. Here's the thing Jefferson's really known for. The Louisiana Purchase of 1803. Now look. Jefferson had been keen on buying the port of New Orleans because if you remember back to Pinckney's treaty, they had opened up the Mississippi River to Americans to use, but America wanted to control the mouth of the Mississippi River because they wanted, to ensure that American products got out to a world market. This is before the Erie Canal is built. So Jefferson is going to send 2 negotiators over to Paris to negotiate with Napoleon, who now controls Louisiana after Napoleon's running roughshod over Europe. Napoleon and the French now control Louisiana. And the 2 ambassadors, James Monroe and Robert Livingston, are authorized to buy New Orleans for $10 million. Congress has authorized the money to buy New Orleans. That is what Congress has authorized, and Jefferson says, I am executing that. When the 2 ambassadors get to Paris, Napoleon says, oh, why would you want just New Orleans for $10 million? I give you the whole ball of wax for 15. So there's an offer on the table. All that for $15 million. That for $10 million. Jefferson looks at that and says, that's just too good to be true. Now, why would Napoleon be so willing to give up such a large chunk of land? Yeah. He needs money to fund the Napoleonic Wars. But wait a minute, I thought France had a revenue stream coming in. Sugar in the Caribbean was the revenue stream for many of the European powers. Was there a sugar colony in the Western Hemisphere that France controlled that may have had their sugar supply disrupted? Bingo! There are slave rebellions going on, particularly in Haiti, under the leadership of a guy named, and I just love saying this guy's name, Toussaint Louverture. But the slave rebellion in Haiti that began in the late 1700s is an onion in the ointment, a monkey in the wrench, a pain in the butt for Napoleon. And he needs that sugar revenue to pay for his war in Europe. And so when this slave rebellion takes place, he can't pay his war machine. So he's looking for cash. Because not only is he fighting a war in Europe, he's also fighting to put down a slave rebellion here in Haiti, which, by the way, the French lose. Haiti becomes an independent republic in 1804, the first country founded by freed slaves. And don't think that that message doesn't resonate in America, because people catch wind of what happened in Haiti, and that's going to lead to slave rebellions in America. In particular, in 1800, there was a slave rebellion led by a guy named Gabriel Prosser, whose conspiracy was to kidnap the governor of Virginia and hold him hostage. And it was found out, he was stopped, he was executed. But he was inspired by the Haitian Revolution. Oh, and the governor that he was going to capture was Governor James Monroe. Anyway, so Jefferson says, okay, should I buy it? Shouldn't I buy it? If I buy it, I get rid of Napoleon. And that's great for national security because we get rid of a foreign power right next to us. And the land is opportunity. Land is wealth. And if I can acquire more land, that will benefit the average person. And Jefferson considered himself to be, the voice of the people. I can help out the average person by providing more opportunity for them to become wealthy and independent farmers, since that's his vision.
Your morning announcement will be on shortly.
Really? We needed that? We needed that? But the question is it constitutional? Congress only authorized the purchase of New Orleans, and here Jefferson's about to make a decision to buy all of Louisiana, and he's never been authorized to do it. And you know what Jefferson does? He does it. Because the good outweighs the bad. Now, Jefferson spent the rest of his life writing letters to people explaining why he did what he did. Because he felt so guilty about it. He realized he violated his own code. But he did it. And he financed the expedition of Lewis and Clark to explore out west without congressional approval either. Lewis and Clark is extra-constitutional. But we needed to know what we bought. And Lewis and Clark, and you notice the detail in their journals, all this stuff is going back to Jefferson, along with nature samples of flora and fauna from out west. And Jefferson's sitting on the floor like a kid in a candy store, unwrapping these boxes with badgers and wolverines and, all manner of things in the boxes. Lewis and Clark take off from St. Louis and make it all the way out to the Pacific coast, telling people along the way, you're now under American control. And not only does America lay claim to all this Louisiana territory, which, by the way, we have no idea what exactly Louisiana is. We just bought it without knowing it, sight unseen. But we also start to lay claim to land that isn't considered part of Louisiana. It's called Oregon.
Thursday, November 7th, 38. Please stand for your pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, so you're going to have conflict. You're going to have conflict out here between the countries that claim Oregon. Spain claims it, Britain claims it, Russia claims it, and now America claims it. And it's going to be one of the reasons why presidents start to encourage people to move out to Oregon, so we have a stronger claim on it. It's the reason why the Oregon Trail takes off at this time.
Winning class will win a donut party and a free movie period. Remember,
guys, in 1804, Thomas Jefferson could point to a number of things and say, re-elect me. I cut your taxes, I cut the budget, I cut the size and scope of the federal government, I defended American interests overseas in the Barbary Pirates War, I doubled the size of the country and got you all this new land. Vote for me again. And people in droves voted for Thomas Jefferson for a second term. But as we know, second terms stink. And here's some of the stink. First off, Thomas Jefferson has a vice president who is not exactly the noblest guy in the country. Aaron Burr not only kills Alexander Hamilton in a duel, so Dick Cheney is only the second vice president to shoot somebody. But Aaron Burr kills Alexander Hamilton in a duel where they had agreed not to shoot one another, and Burr shot him and killed him. So there's duplicitous. But he is also guilty of several conspiracies to try to get different regions of the country to break away and secede so he could become the emperor. He is arrested. Guys, he is the only vice president in history who is arrested. But this is where the real problems come in Jefferson's second term. It's the battle between Britain and France, and America continuing to be sucked into the middle of it. And yes, Jay's Treaty had tried to solve it with the British, and yes, the Convention of 1800 had tried to solve it with the French, but Jefferson is still having to deal with impressment of American sailors. and British financing of Indian raids out on the frontier. And there are a number of Americans who are getting fed up with it. In 1807, an American ship leaving the Chesapeake Bay, the USS Chesapeake, was attacked by the HMS Leopard that was just sitting off the coast. The British were literally blockading America's ports and attacking American ships as they came out of port. And Jefferson says, you know what? Enough is enough. I can't go to war with Britain. I can't go to war with France. But if we allow Americans to trade overseas, they're getting caught in the middle of incidents like this. So Jefferson's decision to keep America out of war is what's called the embargo. Literally, Jefferson tells Americans, you're not allowed to trade overseas. So everybody who relied on international trade to make their money now isn't making money. It causes the economy to go into the toilet. And where have we seen this before, where a government is telling Americans who they can and can't trade with? Navigation Acts, the colonial period. And what do Americans do when they're told who they can and can't trade with? They defy it. They ignore it. And Jefferson has Americans defying his law, and which means he's going to have to enforce it. And that means an expansion of the size and scope of federal government. Jefferson is going to arrest violators of the embargo. He becomes what he despised, because people start calling Jefferson a monarch.
There's a ridiculous amount of